Today's video is academic philosophy is stupid, and also Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which is academic philosophy, and that's going to help provide some evidence to support this idea. Academic philosophy is stupid. All right, so this is the categorical imperative here, and you're going to learn this in any philosophy course. And they teach this at Harvard. They teach it as a plausible interpretation of morality. And this really shows how low quality academic philosophy is. We should be learning this as an implausible interpretation of morality that makes no sense, not something that you could actually apply. And in reality, many people apply this in real life because they were taught it in school. Okay, so anytime you hear somebody says, well, if everyone did that and the result was bad, then that thing is bad. Okay, so for example, you could be littering, and then people say, well, if everybody littered, then the result would be bad, and therefore it's bad, right? And in some cases, that does make sense. Okay, now the categorical imperative is slightly different than the more common version. The more common version just asks, if the result is bad from everyone doing something, then the action is bad. That's the common interpretation. There's a small difference here, okay? So, well, if everyone did something, that's the same as if an action is universally extendable. That's what Immanuel Kant means by that. But when he says without self-contradiction, that's a little bit weirder. So let's explain what that means, okay? So if everyone murdered, this would be self-contradicting, according to Immanuel Kant, because if everyone murdered each other, then there would be nobody left to murder, and you therefore could not continue to do this concept of murder. Okay, that would be an example of what he means by it creating self-contradiction. I guess he means the action itself is unsustainable. Theft, he would argue something similar. If everybody stole, then I guess nobody could steal, because nobody would have their own property anymore, right? Like every property would be stolen, so you couldn't steal anymore. I think that would be a fair interpretation of self-contradiction. And we're going to right away run into some problems here, okay? So let's look at something like homosexuality, all right? If everyone were homosexual, obviously this would create self-contradiction, right? Because you wouldn't have any more kids, and then the human race would die out. So Immanuel Kant would say homosexuality is wrong by the categorical imperative, and some people will agree with that. But then we get to some really weird things, like being single. Okay, now Kant was a religious philosopher. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he was religious. So you're telling me like a monk or a nun, like a Catholic monk or Catholic nun, or even a priest, all these people are single, right? But being single creates self-contradiction. If everyone is single, then the human race will very quickly die out, right? Being single is just as immoral as being homosexual by the categorical imperative, right? There clearly is a problem going on here, and the problem is very simple, okay? To deflate the categorical imperative, all you need to know is this. It's irrational to universally extend an action unless that action would be universally extended in reality. Okay? So what does that mean exactly? It means that it's irrational to imagine what would happen if everyone were single, because that's not actually going to be a realistic scenario. If being single is permissible in society, right? We're allowed to be single. Realistically, maybe 5% of people are actually going to be single. So what we should be imagining is what would happen if 5% of people were single in our society, okay? This would be the correct metaphysical I don't like to use that word. That's kind of a pretentious word. This would be the correct thing to imagine, right? If we're trying to figure out, is it moral to be single? The question we should be asking is, what would happen if 5% of people in our society were single? Because we would be expecting about 5% of people to be single, given that it's morally permissible to do this action, right? It is not rational to imagine what would happen if everybody were single, because not everyone is going to be single. It's very silly to think that everyone would want to be a priest or want to be a nun. Very few people want to. Most people want to have children. So the categorical imperative is simply just irrational. It's flawed morality that makes no sense. Logically speaking, it makes no sense, and by evidence, it makes no sense. Okay, so I think academic philosophy is the only subject you can formally study and come out more ignorant than when you came in. Most of us are like this kid here, maybe not most, but some of us are like this kid. We're building up these pyramids, which kind of symbolize our understanding of morality, our understanding of logic, and our desire to learn truth, our natural curiosity. And academic philosophies like this kid, he's just very angry and obnoxious or whatever, and he's just crushing everything to destroy all progress, right? And if you've ever taken a course in academic philosophy at a university, you've studied philosophy, let me know whether you think my observations are correct, okay? I don't have any data to prove this is correct, because there's different teachers, people learn different things, but I think the overarching view, which is very consistent, it's every student I've ever talked to tells me these same things. First one is morality is subjective. There's no right and wrong, and morality is all relative to a culture. So there's really actually just no point even studying morality. There's no point thinking about what's right and wrong, because it's all just subjective anyways, because of Einstein, right? They probably don't realize this. Most professors probably don't realize this, but all this idea of relativity comes from Einstein. Einstein says we all live in alternate realities and everyone's perspective is correct, right? And that is a lot of how modern thinking works. It all operates on this idea of everyone's view is correct. I think that certainly is a view that's pushed, and that's also why something like Immanuel Kant would be taught as an acceptable interpretation of morality, because morality is all subjective. We're not actually learning anything. It's all just personal opinion, and none of it has any truth value behind it, right? This is why the categorical imperative is taught as a plausible interpretation of morality, as we previously discussed. Next is logic, and logic is even worse. I think anytime someone begins to start understanding things, right, and building a logical worldview, academic philosophy comes in and throws a wrench into the gears and says, no, here is a bunch of low-quality paradoxes that we use to invalidate logic. Therefore, you can't trust logic. Therefore, you can't learn anything about anything. This is nonsense, okay? If you ever do mathematics, if you ever write programs on a computer, if my script is correct, the computer performs the operation I want pretty much all the time, unless there's like some kind of hardware issue. When your math is correct, it predicts the outcome of reality perfectly all the time. If I add 2 plus 5 and I get 7, and then I get 2 oranges and 5 oranges, and I put them together, I get 7. And I can trust that with 100% certainty. But no, how dare you build something constructive and useful? Here's these low quality paradoxes showing that you can't trust logic. Bertrand Russell paradox, real paradox. I know philosophy teachers who teach the Bertrand Russell paradox as a legitimate paradox. It's not. Watch my video on it, okay? It's just low quality logic. Raven's paradox, Gödel's incompleteness theorem. There's a huge list of these paradoxes and things they always jam in to say, oh, you can't trust logic. Today, philosophy is seen as a joke subject. It's not a discipline to consider seriously, even though it's the most important subject there is and the foundation of knowledge in every other subject. This is absolutely right. If your philosophy is bad, your mathematics won't work, your programming won't work, your medicine won't work, all right? You have to get the basics correct in order to build more. Philosophy is the foundation. It's like a house. If you get the foundation wrong, it doesn't matter how good the rest of the house is. It's always going to be shaky and lopsided, all right? And in some ways, it's good that philosophy, academic philosophy at least, is taken as a joke because of the fact that they don't pursue truth, they don't pursue logic, and they don't try to figure out what's right and wrong. Real philosophy should not be taken as a joke. It should be taken as a very serious study, and it should progress. Neil deGrasse Tyson has this video where he says philosophy is a terrible subject because it's like the only subject that's never made any progress in 2,500 years. And he's right in the sense that academic philosophy is a joke. And that's true, it hasn't made any progress in 2,500 years, but real philosophy has, and real philosophers have. And this is why I think that philosophy needs to be removed from the universities, and we should be looking at people outside the universities for philosophy. In fact, Plato himself said no real philosopher would come from his school of philosophy, which was the first university. Plato started the university. So maybe we should listen to Plato. Maybe he's